Hello everyone. Here we are going into Chapter 18, Section 6. We're going to talk about reducing air pollution. There are a lot of ways we can go about this, but really it's going to boil down to legal. We have to set regulations, right? If it's illegal to do this much, that's one of the tools we have. Economics, making it so that it's costly to do pollution. It could be taxes, which kind of goes into legal, but making it beneficial economically. And technology. We have a lot of tools that can actually be used to help clean up the air pollution, like we talked about the catalytic converter. We'll also talk about in our stationary, like our power plants, tools that we put in there to help pull pollution out. Of course, the best solution is to prevent it. That's always the best thing. We need to keep it from happening, because once it happens, then we're into cleanup. And if it keeps happening, we keep cleaning up, it's just a round and round cycle. So prevention is always the best way to go. And those are some of the things that we'll look at. Now, in the United States, let's talk about laws and regulations. In the United States, what we have. 1970, we started the Clean Air Act. 1970, revisited in 77, and in 1990. This created regulations, and these were enforced by the states and the cities. So they were put on, and it was actually up to the city to enforce it, states, etc. This led to massive cleanup of our air quality, especially in LA and New York, some of our worst polluting cities. But just having these regulations that it can't be any more than this did a lot to clean up our air. Now, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, established air quality standards for 6 outdoor air pollutants. These pollutants that we were targeting were carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, suspended particulate matter, just soot, little bits of hydrocarbons in the air, ozone, and lead. Those were the 6 we went to. Now, if you're thinking about carbon dioxide, it's not really a pollutant that causes a problem for life. It does sometimes get flagged as a pollutant because it leads to climate change. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, but it's not really specifically a pollutant. It doesn't cause problems for irritation or eyes, etc. So depending on who you talk to and what we're looking at, carbon dioxide is not one of these flagged pollutants, but carbon monoxide is. Just so we're clear on that one and kind of how it all shakes out. Now, the EPA's national emission standards for 188 hazardous air pollutants. The EPA has set national emission standards for 188 hazardous air pollutants, HAPs, hazardous air pollutants. And we have also created something that's only recently been going out, and this is the toxic release inventory. Everybody, like factories, anybody who emits any of these 188 hazardous air pollutants has to include it like on their website or part of their report of their toxic release inventory. The simple fact of making people release how much of these they're putting out cut them way down. And that's not unusual. When you meter something, once you start having to track something, we tend to start we don't want our numbers to look worse than theirs, or we want our numbers to look better than theirs. And just tracking them has caused them to actually go way down. Now, we do have some new U.S. regulations. We are limiting the CO2 emissions specifically from our coal-fired plants. So once again, coal is just one of our worst ones. But once again, we're setting emissions now on CO2. It's not one of those 6 pollutants, but it does lead to climate change. So we're having to look at doing some limits on CO2 as well. China has actually already started setting some new quality standards for their air quality. They're putting a ban on the high sulfur and high ash content coal in many of their major cities. And this is a real plus because China is really sort of upping a lot of their coal production. They still have a lot, but trying to limit some of the worst examples of coal and cutting down is just a good thing. Anything we do to eliminate it is going to be better for everybody because these fine particles get up in the air and they drift around the entire planet. It's not just always local. Now, in 2018, There were some policy changes considered by the EPA, but unfortunately, those are likely to lead to less healthy air. Now, there's been a change at the presidency, and every time there is, some of these positions move around and things get looked at. So we'll see what happens and goes out there. But in 2018, they were really looking at trying to weaken some of these standards, and that's not really the direction we want to go. We don't want to make our air quality worse. We want to do everything we can to make it better. The graph I have back here is showing what has happened with our laws and regulations since 1990. That was the last strengthening of the air quality and all of these substances. So once again, lead, now that's the one we've seen kind of the sharpest drop off, but lead, nitric oxides, the PM 2.5, that's particle material, 2.5 microns or smaller, the really fine stuff. So it's talking about particulate matter, and the 2.5 is the micron size, really small. CO, carbon monoxide, O3, ozone, and parts particulate matter 10, coarse particles. They're looking at particulate matter. And you can see all of those numbers drifting down, and even the ozone. That dotted line, that is the most recent national standard. So most of our pollutants are going below, and some of them we've seen very significant drops. And this is what we're after. That's what we really want. Now, I'm putting a picture of a scooter up here because when it comes to two-stroke engines, these are where you add oil and the gasoline, and the engine itself mixes them. A lot of these scooters that we see around college campuses, they are much worse at polluting. Driving a scooter for an hour would be equivalent to driving like 34 cars for an hour. So anything that's using some of these diesel, and this is a two-stroke engine, a lot of our, even a riding lawnmower, gasoline, a lot of those are much, much worse pollutants than our cars. So some of these laws and regulations are going to have to trickle down into some of these other vehicles, because as we see more and more of those around, they actually lead to much worse pollution levels. Now, we talked about economics. There's an idea of using the marketplace to reduce outdoor air pollution. What we do is we give companies air allotments. In other words, you're sort of allowed to pollute a certain amount, and you get tickets, if you will. Now, you can sell those or you can buy those. So if you happen to have a company that is polluting too much, you can buy these allotments from other companies. So this is where the economic comes in. If you cut your pollutions down, because everybody gets a certain amount, and we don't need these, they become a commodity that you can sell on the market. So if we get our factory clean and not producing the pollutions, we can sell ours to somebody else. It's a strong incentive it's economic incentive, since everybody's getting the markers, if you will, for their carbon emissions. If you're below the level, you get to sell some of yours off. So there's a benefit for you getting low. Now, some of the proponent or some of the people that are against this, its opponents, if you will, are saying, yes, but that just allows a company that is polluting just to be able to continue to pollute, that they can just kind of, once again, they have enough money so they can just buy the allotments and continue to produce the pollutants. So what happens is we have an area of the country that still stays very polluted, and areas over here are very clean, and it doesn't give them any incentive to actually clean up. In some ways it works, and in some ways it doesn't. There's always pros and cons to everything. The success largely depends on how low the initial cap is set, and then how often it gets lowered. You have to set a cap, and you have to kind of keep lowering that cap. So the idea is people realize, ooh, if we start cutting down our pollution, it'll be good, it'll be beneficial. If the cap is set very high and we never really move it, the system doesn't work too well. We have seen a lot of improvement in companies using this. Once again, it's a tool in the toolkit of laws and regulations and economics to try and encourage companies to pollute less. We also have technology that helps us do this, specifically on coal burning power plants. We put these in a lot of our factories, but coal is just the worst. We have electrostatic precipitors and wet scrubbers. Let's take a look at them. So pulling up first, I'm just going to pull up the electrostatic precipitator. This is a smokestack. Now this will be the inside of the smokestack. It's just, from our perspective outside, it's just a smokestack. And over here is what it looks like on the inside. Now on the electrostatic, it's just that. Static, electricity. We put a negatively charged electrode down through the center of the smokestack. It's negatively charged. It causes the side of the wall to become positively charged. As the particulate matter, the smoke is coming up, the particles wind up being attracted to the positive walls. They get drawn, they get pushed away, repelled from the negative, and they attach to the positive walls. And as these particles get attached to the wall, they just drift and fall off. They're solid particles. So they're warm, they're hot, but then they come onto the sides, they stick there, and then in time they just drop off down into a collection chamber. We just have a pit at the bottom. We do have to take that into a landfill, but it's keeping all that particulate matter from going up into the cloud and the air, which can lead to, acid rain, precipitation, breathing problems, all that. That's an electrostatic precipitator. Now, this picture here is of a wet scrubber, different technologies, if you will. The electrostatic precipitator is all dry, the wet scrubber is obviously wet. So we kind of have a separator, a filter up at the top. The smoke comes up and we spray fine amounts of mist or water. The water clings onto the smoke particles coming up, just like rain washing and cleaning it out. And then this smoke smut coated water sinks down into the bottom. We put it out as a really fine mist, but it slowly settles down. So kind of like a wet cloud, and the water drips down, and then we get a sludge at the bottom. And the same thing, that sludge has to be taken away to a landfill and disposed of. But these are two technologies, since we put them in the 70s and 80s, they have dramatically cut down on the pollution in air. So when we talk about these solutions, now, mainly in air, we have the stationary sources, coal and industry, and we have our motor vehicles. So some of the solutions here, well, number one, if we're gonna burn coal, make sure we burn low sulfur content coal. And ideally, let's start burning coal altogether. Convert coal into liquid or gaseous fuels. Once again, if we're gonna have to burn some sort of fossil fuel, natural gas is much better. And ideally, we want to get ourselves into renewables, wind, water, and solar, ideally. Then reduction, what do we do? That was prevention. How do we prevent it? Well, how do we reduction? We got to disperse the emissions that are going to be going downwind. Tall smokestacks help that. The higher the smokestack, it can help spread it out so the air gets it more diffused. Once again, we want to have get as many of the pollutants out as possible using our scrubbers or electrostatic precipitators. And then we need to tax the pollution. The amount of pollution coming out, you get taxed for. Less pollution, less tax. It's got to come to economics most of the time when we're talking about a business. Now, motor vehicles, our cars, our trucks, our scooters, if you will. But this gets down to things also like ships, boats, and a lot of our ships and boats are using diesel, and this puts a lot more pollutants in the air. We talked about scooters, even riding lawnmowers or things like little go-karts. Not as many, but they all have to be looked at because they're all part of the problem. So when we talk about our motor vehicles, once again, we need to make sure that we have all the technology in place, but let's just take a look at our solutions here, what to do. Well, prevention. If you can, walk, bike, or take mass transit. Take a bus somewhere, take a train somewhere, instead of just 3 people in a car. Get on a train or a bus that's carrying more people when it's possible. I know it's not always possible, but these are ideas that we've got to have a mind shift of how to go about it. We've got to look at all of us, not just me and what I want to do. We need to improve the fuel efficiency. higher miles per gallon. And we need to get older and polluting cars off the road. There has to be incentives. If you have a car or it have to be tested, and if it's putting out pollutants, you're going to be taxed on it. And at a certain point, somebody says it's not worth keeping this old car. I need to get a new car so it's saving me money. We need to have some sort of incentive to get old cars that are more polluting off of the roads. Reduction. Make sure everything also has the emission control devices. Our cars largely do. We need to do something about like ships and trucks, scooters, things that are putting a lot more pollutants out. We need to inspect the car exhaust system. You need to have a system where at least once a year, you got to pull your car in and get it tested. Because a lot of times it's a simple maintenance issue. Your car is putting out more pollutants now, so it has to get repaired or fixed. And we just need to set strict emission standards. You know, cars are not allowed to put out more than this. Your scooter is not allowed to put out more pollution than this, whatever the case is. Standards just have to be set. Let's revisit the core case study about Los Angeles. We looked at them early on, 50s, 60s, the smog was so bad, lots of public uproar, outcry. 70s, we started the Clean Air Act. 90s, it was 77, it was strengthened. 90s, it was strengthened. Now in 2018, the city rank. It was still highest in its ozone pollution. And LA has been the worst smog of all cities in America for 19 of the last 20 years. However, in 2017, it had its lowest pollution levels since 1999. So, 20 years, some of its lowest levels. Even though the city has grown, there's a lot more cars, there's even more industry, the air quality is better. And in some days, it's much better. The picture back here, we'll kind of compare them, right? The one on top was LA a while back. Here's LA on a nice, clear, clean day. Now, kind of depends on the temperature inversion. There's some other, occasional things that cause it. But the air quality in LA has gotten much better, tremendously better than it was in the 50s and 60s. But once again, even since 2000, air quality's improved, and largely it's because of the technology and these economic incentives that have been put into place. Now, the largest source of pollutants for LA, a lot of times we think it's all the cars and the traffic. It's actually the ports. You have 2 ports, and the ships burn diesel fuel. So all the ships coming in, they're coming in at the ocean, and the ocean blows, the breeze comes inland, and then LA has mountains up behind it, so that those port ships, the diesel fumes come in and they get trapped in the city. One of the worst cases of pollution in LA is not actually their industry and their cars, it's the ships coming into port. Once again, we need to try and do everything we can to cut emissions down on everything. Because, like I say, in LA, the pollution just gets trapped by those mountains, and on the days that we have a thermal inversion, there's nowhere for it to go, and it just fills up the valley. Now, we've talked about the pollution. We've largely been talking about outdoor air pollution. Let's transition and talk about indoor air pollution a little bit. How do we reduce it? In a lot of places, it's a greater threat to human health than outdoor air pollution. By and large, the outdoor air is really nice. Now, you might be in a very polluted city, but a lot of times you can go outside. I love to get out in nature. I like to go kayaking. I like to get out in the woods, and it's beautiful. It's clear, nice air. Well, what do we do to clean up our indoor air? Because sometimes that's the problem. We get that sick building syndrome. Well, number one is prevention. Don't have the chemicals in your house or your building. Don't smoke inside. Some of these things that seem somewhat obvious, and then cleanup. If it's there, you got to somehow take care of it. The chemicals are in, you got to air them out some way. So, what can you do? In the home you live in, or the office place that you're at, or your school, depending on what the situation might be. Well, as far as we're talking about your house, your home, your apartment, etc., well, test it for radon. They're fairly inexpensive kits. You can order them off of Amazon, what have you, but test for radon and formaldehyde. These are two of the most common that we find that lead to really bad problems. And if you find them, then you can take corrective measures to get rid of the sources. With radon, usually you have to seal the cracks in your foundation or the walls so that it doesn't leak into your house. It goes outside where it really doesn't cause a problem. Try not to buy furniture or other products that contain formaldehyde. Check it, look at the tag. If it's made with formaldehyde, then the formaldehyde continues to just leak into your home. Carpets, some furniture, and even some floor coverings are made with it. Formaldehyde in your home causes air pollution problems. It's an irritant, eye irritant, breathing irritant, etc. You can test for asbestos fibers. If you live in an old home, something that's from the 70s or below, there's a high chance there's asbestos in it, and you want to have that out. You breathe it in, it causes problems. And if you smoke, do it outside. Don't smoke inside. Go outside where the smoke and the chemicals and the vapors can disperse into the atmosphere. You smoke inside the house, the chemicals stay there. You're not only smoking it in, you're breathing it in later, and secondhand smoke is affecting the smoker as well as everybody else in the house. If you have any kind of wood burning stove, etc., kerosene burning stove, gas burning heaters, make sure they're properly installed, vented, and maintained. Otherwise, everything's not burning off, and some of those gases are just escaping into the home. Once again, causes lightheadedness, dizziness, just all kinds of problems. Carbon monoxide testers in the house or detectors are good. Once again, an improper burn, even if it's at your stove, not enough oxygen in the house, and it creates carbon monoxide. Use fans, circulate your air. A lot of times like in the wintertime, we have our fans reversed, so it kind of pulls the air up, but it keeps it circulated. You can have it pushing down in the summertime, pulling up in the winter, but you want to have that air circulated as much as possible. Grow some houseplants. Houseplants are amazing at pulling pollutants out of the air. That's really what they do. The more houseplants you have, the better. But like some ivy, rubber tree plants, ficus, there's a lot of trees that do really well inside, or small plants. The more of them, the better. It'll help keep your house cleaner. Don't store any kind of chemicals in your house or in an attached garage. Put things like gasoline or solvents or paint thinner, paint itself, mineral spirits. Keep all that in some sort of shed outside, away from your indoor living space. Because even if you're in a contained garage, those chemicals make their way into the home and you're breathing them in a regular basis. Take off your shoes before coming in the house. Well, when you walk around outside, you wind up getting lead traces and things on your shoes. You walk on your carpet, it gets in the carpet, and it adds to lead levels that can rise in your house. Some of the things you may not think about, but really you can do. Even taking off your shoes can help. Keeps your floors cleaner too. Guys, that's it for chapter 18, section 6. Come back next time and we'll talk about the ozone layer, what we did to mess it up, and what we've done to try and fix it. Take care, guys, and we'll see you next time.